first and foremost, just be a good person. It's that's the root. It's all about who do you want to be, right? How do you want to do it? How do you want to grow? What do you want the legacy of the organization to be? So you were in by a certain time, and you didn't dare leave before, six. We'll take care of this, and we'll kind of keep moving. And then it was when we saw the neurosurgeon that we found what was the tumor. It's that simple. You just have to remember where it started.
Welcome to the Sinclair podcast, where we share real-world experiences, wisdom, and the honest struggles of entrepreneurs to help you navigate and scale your business with confidence. All right, buddy. Michael Lovern, you and I go back to, I think, 2019. We met in Toronto at the Facilis event, and I think some small interactions, probably a couple cocktails, but the CEO of Brandito, and in so many ways, I've had so much respect from you or for you since day one. Being in the same industry, being a leader that just got, I'll call a spade, a hell of a lot further ahead in a shorter amount of time than Sean and I did. But it was 2020 and COVID. We had this sort of mastermind group that we had the kickoff meeting in Vegas, and COVID hits, and I mean, it devastated our industry. But you were a guy I leaned on a lot, and I think that was really, we developed our friendship without hanging out a lot, but a lot of phone calls, a lot of Zooms, masterminding. How do we fix this industry? What other ideas can we come up with? I just appreciate you not only for coming on today to share your story, but for your friendship and your mentorship. And I'm really excited to have you on today.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'll be honest, we're off to a great start, because that's maybe some of the nicest stuff anybody's ever said about me. So kudos to that. I appreciate the kind words, and excited to be here, man. I've been following what you're doing too, and just, happy to be a part of it.
That's awesome. Well, I got the easy job. I just get to, ask a few questions and hear some awesome stories. So that's it. Let's go. Give us a little bit of your background, growing up, where you're born and raised, and tell us about more about you.
Yeah. Born and raised in Virginia. I actually grew up for the first part of my childhood in the western part of the state, a little tiny small town, raised by a single mother, who, is a big piece of kind of my life and my upbringing, major role model for me, for sure. But moved to Richmond in my high school years, and left a little bit, obviously, for college. Then left a little bit on the first part of my career, but I ended up back in Richmond, married a Richmond girl who has never left. She born and raised, went to college in Richmond, and that's it. That's kind of the story. This has been home for quite some time now. It's where we're raising our family, and where I founded Brandito. Yeah, that's it.
That's great. You mentioned, mom being such a big influence, a role model. When you think back, who are some other role models or people that were really influential in you as a person and maybe you as your career?
Yeah, I think, look, I have a philosophy, and look, I have some tremendous role models and some people that I lean on quite a bit, and as I hope everybody does, but, I've always made a habit of really kind of paying attention and listening to everybody around me. And that's the good, that's the bad. It's all of those things in between. Because I'm a firm believer that, you have to have whoever you are at the core, right? You have to have your values and the things you believe in. But I think it's incredibly important where if you just are able to pull a snippet from a person here and a snippet from a person there, that can have the biggest impact, and so I will kind of start by saying and answering that question by it's a lot of people. I've taken bits and pieces from a ton of different people over the years. But, the obvious ones, I mentioned my mom, single mother, four kids, she worked herself to the bone. She actually works at Brandito today. And quite honestly, she still works probably more hours than anybody in the office, which is unbelievable. But
God bless her.
Yeah, I always tell her she has a sickness, right? And it's work is the sickness. But my grandparents were a big piece of my life. I still think back, there was a time where we actually lived with my grandparents for a short amount of time. And I still have very vivid memories of the mornings of my grandfather going to work and my grandfather coming home from work, and that daily cadence and routine and consistency, and the hours that he put in. And it's those little things, between him and my mother that they kind of stick with me and have always kind of stuck with me up to this point. But and then look, I've been really, really blessed. I've been surrounded by great people, peers in my career, and people that have gone on to be incredibly successful as entrepreneurs or whatever else that might be. And so I draw inspiration from all of those folks. I think, again, like I said, I think it's just incredibly important. But family, friends, I try to keep a pretty tight knit circle. As far as the folks I lean on. But like I said, I try to pull from a little bit of everything.
Yeah, that's great advice. What were some of those values that you remember that were either spoken or unspoken growing up in the household?
Yeah, I think it's, if there's one kind of common message, and it's the same message I honestly pass on to my daughters today, and that's, first and foremost, just be a good person. That's the root. Then we're off to a pretty good start, right?
Yeah.
Be kind to people, and so if you start there, that's a foundation, and then beyond that foundation, life's tough. There are ups, there are downs. Everybody goes through different things. So you always have to remember that. But, being kind, working hard, those things will always take you to a certain point, and then there's always some luck and there's other factors that kind of come into play. But, if you work hard, you try, you support the people around you, you're going to get that in return. And I think that's just kind of the home I grew up in. We're an incredibly tight family. And, I lean on my family still to this day quite a bit. And I think that's it. Can you be kind, right? Can you support people around you?
Yeah.
And do you work hard? Can you put in the work, and whatever it is that you're passionate about?
Yeah, that's great. And sometimes those are easier said than done. I mean, very basic,
Yeah.
simple values, but to live those every day like you do is not always easy. So tell me about your first job that you remember, paid or
Well,
paid or unpaid. Let's go paid.
yeah, paid. Gosh, and probably my worst job I've ever had. Honestly, nothing against it. So, I love these people that I worked with, but I actually worked in a grocery store in the deli and sliced lunch meat.
Oh man,
That was that
amazing.
was the job. And it was, I worked with a group of people that had been there for years and years and years in different capacities. And they've been in this department for a long time. And I was the person that got all the bad jobs, because I was the young one. So it's,
I've cleaned a deli meat slicer before. I was the bake shop the department over, but filling in for the deli, that's not fun work.
there was a while where I didn't even want to eat deli meat because like cleaning that machine, I still remember like the bleach smell
Oh,
of doing
it's
that. And
nasty.
it is nasty. Yeah, it is nasty. It'll make you think twice about eating deli meat. But
You
anyway,
remember the sound that head cheese made going
oh
through?
yeah.
It was nasty, like the jelly meat.
Yeah, not my favorite job. Let's put it that way. But that was first job, and honestly, probably the worst job. But yeah, I mean, I've done all kinds of things. I've done labor. I did general labor growing up a lot. I'm in the service industry. I've cut grass. I've done a little bit of that. I waited tables for. I will also say this. I waited tables for 2 weeks, maybe. I think maybe 2 weeks. I was an
Why
awful,
so long?
awful.
What
I was
happened?
an awful waiter. I mean, I was an
Oh,
absolute awful waiter and not very patient either. So it just didn't quite work out for me. But look, I will say this. I have a ton of respect for people that do work in the restaurant industry. It's not easy. There's no question about that. But yeah, I've done a little bit of everything. I mean, I dabbled in a lot, failed a lot, got fired a number of times, went through my normal. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's an early lesson. That's for sure.
yeah, for sure. Speaking of lessons and some of life skills and challenges, if you don't mind sharing or open up, you had a bit of a health scare sort of earlier on, and you were in your 20s, I believe, if you can.
Yeah, I was, 20, 21 years old. I was actually In my sophomore year of college, but I was playing basketball in college. I actually just had transferred into a new school and had some back problems, on and off for a while, and it was progressively getting worse and worse and worse. But I was actually up at the school I had transferred into and just playing kind of summer pickup ball and kind of going through the normal routine. And it got to the point where after kind of going through those workouts and at the end of the day in the evening, I couldn't get out of bed. I
Oh,
physically could
man.
not pick myself up. And, it ended up
And
turning
you're in
into,
great shape. You're healthy. You're 21
oh
years
yeah,
old. Like you got to be starting to have some questions at this point.
Yeah, 100%. And, again, I've been seeing, a doctor and kind of got the normal answers of, oh, it's a muscle problem and, let's stretch more and let's do some PT and let's do all of these things. Well, at this point, we kind of changed course and decided to actually went to a different doctor who said, hey, let's be careful and let's do an x-ray. And, so we did an x-ray, came back and they kind of pinpointed what they thought the problem was, which looked like a cyst kind of on my spinal column, in a place that quite honestly was considered fairly normal, to have a cyst, but they thought, okay, maybe, this thing's causing some issues with some nerves or whatever else, could be going on. So let's go a step further. Let's do an MRI and let's just kind of see what this is, what's going on, what's happening. Well, MRI happens. I actually go, if I remember correctly, gosh, I actually went back to school at this point, and I think I had just gotten back and had gotten a phone call and basically just said, "Hey, look, we need you to come in. We need you to come home. We need you to bring your mother with you and all these different things." And I
Man.
didn't think anything of it, so I ended up going in, sitting down. And what we found was, what looked to be like a larger mass that was on kind of the L1, L2 area of the spinal column. And again, didn't know a whole lot at that time. It did get a little more serious to a point where we then, had to go and see, a neurosurgeon at that point. And still, being 20 years old, you don't think anything of it, right? You're invincible. You think, "Oh, okay, like we'll take care of this and we'll kind of keep moving." And then it was when we saw the neurosurgeon that we found what was a tumor that was actually wrapped like a vine around
Oh,
my spine, my
man.
vertebrae. And we immediately went into a place of the unknown. You don't know what this thing is. You don't know how serious it is, other than obviously seeing the picture of it and then hearing the doctor, kind of go through what the next steps were. And those next steps for me were a bed rest. I pretty much got put on bed rest immediately. They
Oh,
started pumping me full of steroids and other things to kind of keep my body working, everything moving. And what we ended up finding out, and this is the short version too. So just keep that in mind. So
jeez. It's crazy.
anyway, what we ended up finding out was it took about, again, I'm guessing here from memory, it ended up taking 4 or 5 months after doing a biopsy to figure out that this was actually a tumor that nobody had ever seen before.
You're
And
kidding.
we're talking about this biopsy at this point had actually gone to labs all over the world. And it gone
Really?
to it had gone all over the world to different labs, and nobody could pinpoint exactly what type of tumor this was. And the problem with that is there was no plan to treat it. Like, how do we treat this stuff? And so without a plan, you just kind of keep going down the path of being on bed rest, medicine, and everything else. Well, we ended up getting a somewhat of a diagnosis from a lab down in Atlanta, I believe it was, who came back and said, we're going to treat it as hemangioparasitoma, which nobody will ever be able to pronounce that again. But just a type of tumor, benign in nature, hemangioparasitomas are. But because of that, the recommended treatment was, well, we're just going to operate. We need to go in, we need to take it out. And we kind of knew that from the get go anyway. The guesswork started though with, we weren't quite sure what we were going to encounter when we got in there. My doctor just kind of said, hey, we've got to go in. We don't have any more time. So we're going to kind of go in blind. And, luckily I had one of the best neurosurgeons I could possibly have. Very fortunate to have a great hospital here in Richmond. So I had access to great care. But, he went in with a team of doctors. It was a procedure where I don't remember it was how many hours it was, but essentially they went in, they removed the tumor, and that really kind of set off the next year and a half of my life, to be quite honest with you, because it was a time where I went in and one didn't know, or do you make it through surgery? Do is the paralysis? That was obviously a real possibility. What's
Jeez,
the end result going to be?
frightening. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very frightening. And again, being 20 years old, 21, well, I guess I was 21 years old maybe at this time, it's just a bit of a whirlwind, and your life gets flipped completely upside down. I was a kind of easygoing, free spirit, college kid, doing what I love to do. And that changed instantly. But yeah, ended up, gosh, I spent post surgery when I got home. I spent, I don't know how many months, maybe 5, 6 months in a hospital bed in my living room.
And this
And
is after you're 5 months at
yeah,
home, bedridden
yep.
anyway, as a college student that just wants to go do your thing.
That's right. So yeah, I had to go through heavy rehabilitation. I mean, I went from a hospital bed for months and months, and my mother taking care of me and working full time while doing that, and my sisters chipping in. I have 3 sisters, and my sisters chipping in, taking care of me, my grandparents, and getting me to rehab. So I went from hospital bed to wheelchair, to walker, to eventually, obviously walking on my own again. And, the thing well, and I should add this, I guess about 3 months after being home, I actually had a pulmonary embolism.
Jesus. Because you weren't going through enough at that point.
Yeah, which I would say, like, you know, I can still remember that night, that moment, when that happened. And that was different. All this other stuff was dealing with pain and kind of going step by step, but that was different. So that threw a wrench in things in the rehab process and so on. So, I could go on for hours and hours and hours about this experience. But look, this has obviously played a major, major role in my life and kind of where I am today. It really kicked off by me saying, when I'm going through rehab, like, hey, I'm going to come back. I'm going to play another year of basketball. And my neurosurgeon kind of looked at me and was like, no, you're not. Like you're not doing that. There's no way. Like, I'm not even going to allow you to do that. So, let's stop there. And I said, no, that's not an option. Like that's what it is. That's what we're going to do. And to me, that's the moment in kind of my life where I just, above all else, set a goal and knew what I had to do. And that's all I focused on. Physically, can I get back to a point where I'm able to go do that? I should also say there's a guy that my coach at the time was tremendous and actually held a spot for me, knowing that I was not
Wow.
going to be able to contribute whatsoever. Right. Like, but that wasn't the point. The point was, can you go back? Can you do it? Can you practice? Can you be a part of it? Which I did. I did. It took, I went back, gosh, I guess it was a year and a half. I missed of school, and went back and ended up playing, for 1 year basically after that. And then hung it up afterwards. In fact, not only hung it up, but never went back to school, which is a whole nother story. But, um,
Man, that's an incredible story. I appreciate you, taking right to that defining moment. One of the questions as I'm just hearing you at that age going through this, like,
yeah,
did you go back to that neurosurgeon and get him a pair of tickets the first game you're on the court? I mean, because he or she would have just loved that, right? To
you
sit there
know,
and say, you won't play. Let's just be realistic. Man, how crazy was that?
yeah, I would. So unfortunately, when you go through something like this, you end up having a long-standing relationship with with your doctor.
Yes.
And look, I actually saw him, geez, just maybe 6 months ago, again. It's such a unique relationship because you can't even imagine. There's nothing I could ever say to him or his nurses or anybody that's going to do it justice. right?
Yeah, for
You
sure.
just can't, and nor does he want you to. I think that's the other thing is like he's somebody that's incredibly passionate about his craft and his job. And, so
That's a win for
it's,
both of you guys.
it's a
That's
win
so
for
cool.
both. That's
Yeah,
exactly right. But yeah, he's an unbelievable guy, unbelievable doctor. Yeah, I can't say enough good stuff, but, I owe him a lot. There's no question about that.
it's incredible. Take me to the job you had before you started the company.
Hmm.
What was
Well,
that?
yeah,
I'll dovetail this after, but the next question is, what was that thing that drove you to say I'm doing it?
yeah, I think so. I actually started my career, which really happened by chance too, to be honest with you. It's a wild journey, a wild ride, but I was in staffing for my whole career up until I started Brandito, which, led me to kind of get to the point where I was comfortable, one, going out on my own. Two, I got some really great training. Three, again, I mentioned this earlier, was surrounded by some unbelievable people that kind of molded me and helped me get to where I needed to be, just from a business standpoint. But yeah, so staffing, I did everything from IT staffing. Actually started my career in light production, manufacturing, distribution staffing. That was something where I think kind of the work ethic translated quite well, right? It was an environment that you got great training, but you worked hard. Like the expectation was that you put in hours, and I had to tell my salespeople today, you would kill me if I made you do what I had to do early in my career. It's the
Oh
100
yeah,
dials, it's this, that, it's the other. But that's kind of that's the jump off point for me, right? Of understanding kind of the effort and the time and the consistency that has to come with being successful in business. You can translate that in personal life over, and yeah, and I had some of that from my experience, but that was kind of the first time where I saw what hard work and consistency could produce. And again, training, sales, understanding all of these things because I was in the sales capacity, and that really was the key for me to be able to, one, start Brandito, but then grow Brandito a significant amount early.
for sure. And I mean, you shared a couple stories back in the day, but how cutthroat that environment was, and like you don't leave no matter what time of day. Can you just
Oh yeah.
share a couple experiences there?
Yeah, it's just, it's the expectation that you're there by a certain time. It was still a time and an era where you were in, shirt and tie, suit and tie every day except for Fridays. So you were in by a certain time and you didn't dare leave before, 6 p.m. Like 6 p.m. is what 5 p.m. is today, is what I'll say, right? You see people 5 p.m. comes, kind of time to go home. If it was before 6 p.m., people looked at you like you were crazy. And at times, even I had managers that were like, "No, sit down. There's work to do." And in the grand scheme of things, like I didn't care, right? At the time, young, single, working with a bunch of people that I liked, that I admired, and working on a team of people as well. I think that was the other component that was unique about that environment is you're typically in a pod or a team, and so you don't want to let those people down. And so, yeah, it was, 6 p.m. You're just getting going, and if you have stuff to get done, you go until you need to go to get the job done. And there was no other expectation, like you were looked at as if you weren't working hard, if you weren't putting in those hours. It's just how it was.
And I got to assume there was a culture of that sort of environment of, hey, you're going to know what you're signing up for, and we're going to work hard, play hard, but we're going to put the hours in and
Yeah.
support each other in the team.
Yeah, 100%. And look, I got lucky. So when I left the last year that I was in school and I came home, I actually, one of my best friends that I grew up with, and also somebody that I greatly admire from a business standpoint, but he had already started working there. He had interned there through high school and then college. Like he had interned there for I don't know how long, 6 years, something ridiculous. He answered phones in high school for him, but he
Great.
got me to come in and do an internship. And that's kind of where I got started in the business. And right from the get go, the very first day that I was there for an internship, a guy, good friend of mine and my future boss, first boss, put a stack. It was folders at that time. Nothing was digital, right? So everything was a paper folder. He put a stack of folders, probably 100 high, on this desk. I didn't know anything that was going on. Didn't even really have an idea of what we did. And he said, call every single one of these people and see if they're looking for work. And I looked at him and I was like, are you serious?
What did I
This
just
is,
sign up for?
yeah, this is what you want me to do? And he's like, yeah, every single one of them. And when you get done with that, I'll give you another stack of folders. And that was my introduction to it. And I did. I called every single one of those people. And then he did. He brought another stack of folders when it was all said and done. So that's how I started in that business. And then what ended up happening was I had made a decision towards the end of that summer that I was not going to go back to school. And that was based on a lot of things. One, what I had just been through, kind of the road back. It had taken its toll on me kind of personally. There's student loan debt at the time. There's medical debt, that's there and piling up. And I just kind of made a decision and said, you know what? I'm going to work. I'm going to go into the workforce. This is what I need to do. And this is what I want to do. And I actually went to the same guy and said, hey, I've decided I'm not going back to school. Would you be willing? Is there an opportunity for me to stay on here full time? And he said, look, I would love that, but let me see, let me ask the right people. And he actually came back and said, hey, look, we have a policy here. I'm sorry, I can't hire you. We only hire people with a college degree, and, there's just nothing we can do. And I said, look, I understand. And like, I get it. That's the policy. Like, I'll go look elsewhere. I'll go find another job. And that was it. Internship finished, and I kind of set on this path, immediately to start kind of looking around and trying to figure out what I was going to do. He called me the next day and said, hey, look, can you come, over to the office, just to kind of close out and whatever else. And I said, sure. And I went over and he pulled me in a conference room and he said, look, I kind of went to bat for you. I kind of fought for you here. And this is very unusual, but they're going to let you come on board full time with the promise that you go back to school at the same time and finish your degree.
Really?
And I said, this is awesome. This is great. Like, you have my word. I'll go back. I'll finish my degree. And he said, great, you start today. And that was it. And that's how I got into the business. Well, fast forward, maybe 2 years later, I was getting promoted. I was moving to another office to help open up an office with the guy, my best friend who got me into the company. He was leading the charge of opening a new office. And so I moved, I got promoted a couple of years into it, and kind of the rest is history. I just kind of went from there. And I always joke, I still joke with him because, again, like I said, he's still a good friend of mine. And I tell him still all the time that I promise I'm still going to go back and get my degree, because that never happened.
That's great. I mean, you had good intentions, right? Both of you at the time, but.
Yeah. And look, I think, you talk about another moment and kind of this journey that I was on. And that was another moment, because when he gave me that opportunity, it was another step in the direction of, I can't mess this up. Like, there are a lot of people working in that environment that it was their first job out of college, and, it was a good job and they enjoyed it. I was different. I didn't have an opportunity to mess that up. I had to be successful, and I knew I had to be successful. There was no other option in the moment other than that. And so I think that's another moment where it's just like, okay, like this is it. Like, this is what you have to do. You've got to figure this out. And you've got to do it really, really well. And so I think, you talk about, again, what are these benchmarks? What are these things that kind of influenced where you are today?
Sure.
So that's absolutely one.
Yeah, such great. I mean, you got the chance, but you created the opportunity for yourself, and you succeeded on it.
Yeah. It's and look, I again, you talk about people you owe. I've already mentioned the doctor. I owe the people in that organization too, because they took a chance. And I certainly did my best and did my part. But without that, if he doesn't go to bat for me, who knows? I go in a completely different path potentially.
I think you and I could do a whole other episode that we can't get to now on post-secondary and the value and the cost benefit of that.
Yeah.
So
I'm not the guy, like, look, I'm all for college education. I don't want anybody to take this as like, oh, he thinks college is worthless. Certainly not that. Like I would tell anybody, like, It's worth its weight in gold, but it's not everybody's path, right? There's nothing that states that is necessary to be successful in whatever you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, man. Take me to start up a Brandito. It's 2009. Where'd you get this crazy idea to go and get into branded merchandise? And I ask everyone this. It's like, how'd you get into this industry and why?
Yeah, which I think the most common answer that you probably hear too, which is not much different for me, is by chance. I mean, it was
Fell
almost
into
by
it.
chance, right? Fell into it. And I actually had a partner when I originally started the company. We originally Shockoe Marketing Group was our very first name. Terrible name, but hey, it's the best we can come up with. We rebranded to Brandito, I think maybe a year and a half into it, somewhere in there. But I was out on my own, kind of building a business plan, and in that moment, he had kind of talked about doing the same thing or going out on his own. And he had an idea that was somewhat similar to what Brandito is today, to what promotional products is today. A little bit different, was more of a sports tilt, to it, uniforming and some other things. And I just kind of said, like, that's really interesting. Like, let me dig into this. Let me look at this. And so I did. I kind of went back, and it was also interesting because I learned about the industry from somebody else besides him, the promotional products industry. And they had kind of said,
Really?
"Hey, look, I think you could be really successful in this. You should think about it." And in that moment, I just kind of said, like, no chance. I don't like even promotional products. I have no idea what that is. It's like, there's nothing sexy about that, right?
Trinkets and trash, what
That's
it
right.
was well known as at that point.
100% catalog sales at its finest in that moment. So, but anyway, what ended up happening was we ended up coming back together, and I kind of saw a plan and an opportunity where, the corporate world, there was just, in blank canvas of opportunity and things that I thought we could do and be successful. And that's really it. And what I saw in the moment was a very antiquated, stale industry, and it was an industry that really needed a facelift from a sales standpoint, sales process standpoint, and just kind of what the customer journey should look like. And that was my background, right? And that's kind of where I came from, and where I felt most comfortable, where my strength was. And that's it. We really started just on a simple idea that we were going to change the buying experience of our customer. Like, they've got to be buying differently. And that's because I saw customers, and I talked to certain old corporate customers of mine. And, it was just a process that made no sense. It was literally flipping through a catalog and calling somebody and placing an order. And I thought, for the amount of money people are spending on these goods, like, that's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Correct. That's right. Oh, it did. I mean, and you know this, in 2009, a ton of people are still faxing orders and, to suppliers and all kinds of stuff. So
Absolutely.
I was just a bit floored by, personally, not knowing anything about the industry. And that was it. That was kind of the jump off point, and we kind of hit the ground running. I did all the sales originally. He did kind of all the back office and the operations work. Certainly can talk about the early success and kind of where that started. But, it's a place where he's actually stayed in the business with me for about 2 years, I think, and then decided that he wanted to actually go more on a path that he originally had set out to go on, before we kind of turned into to then Shockoe Marketing Group and Brandito. So he left the business, and again, another moment where, things changed tremendously, and we kind of set on an own path and a specific path, and here we are.
It's amazing. First question, remember your first order you ever wrote? Do you remember what it was?
Gosh, I wish I did, but I don't. But
You were just
yeah, I was just going. I do like I know our first three customers because they're all still customers today. And I remember the first meeting, and this is a true story. So the first meeting I had was again with one of our customers today, a great company that's headquartered in Richmond, Virginia. And I walked in, we sat in the conference room, and we walked out with business. And as I was sitting in the lobby, I actually saw one of the current vendors walk into the lobby as I'm waiting to take this meeting to drop off, no lie, a stack of catalogs on
classic.
the front desk. And I walked in, and hold on a second, I'm going to adjust this. I walked in into the conference room, and I first question I asked is, "Hey, I just noticed somebody come in and drop a stack of catalogs at the front desk, you know, it, is that common? And the answer I got was, yeah, that's actually how we order today. We look through we look through the catalogs and figure out what we want, and we call and place an order. And that was it. You know,
You were licking your
that,
chops at this point. You're like,
yeah, I
okay,
mean, that was it.
this should be good.
Yeah. And so, yeah, and that's literally, we walked out of there. I think a couple of weeks later, we got our second customer. It kind of fell quickly for us of gaining, some pretty decent customers in the Richmond market. And quite frankly, man, we were just figuring it out. At that point, like when it came to customer service and it came to, how we were going to interact with our customers and what we were going to provide, we were great there. The rest, I would never tell them this today, or probably would. They're going to hear it here anyway, is, we had no idea what we were doing on the back end. No idea. Really
Yeah, it's the
crazy.
entrepreneurial spirit in you that you figured out.
Yeah. Yeah. And and as there's a lot of moving parts and pieces in our industry. There's lots of things that can go wrong. And, I also laugh because actually the very first thing I did in our industry was I went to Orlando to the ASI trade show. It's our industry trade show. And, I'm walking the floor, I'm looking at all this stuff, have no idea what I'm looking at, have no idea who I'm talking to. And, all of these people keep showing me these products. And I'm like, oh, this is great. Yeah, yeah, I could see this. I could use this. Great. And like, yeah, it's on an arm, so they're talking to me in pricing codes. And I
Yeah,
have no idea what they're saying. It's like, I'm just like nodding my head like, oh, yeah, great. Yeah, awesome.
the secret coded pricing, right?
That's right. And, so I'm sitting there and I'm going booth to booth to booth. And I probably was on, I was actually probably halfway through my day. And finally I said, hey, I've got to stop you. Like, what are you talking about?
That's great.
Everybody keeps flirting these codes and these letters at me. And that's all anybody's saying. And they're like, and I wish I remember who that was, but they literally stopped and they said, do you not understand the pricing model in the industry? And I was like, first day, I have no idea.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
enlighten me. Oh
Yeah.
man, that's
And
awesome.
and it's even better. They go through it. They actually went over to like their desk and bring me this little card, of like to like the
The cheat sheet.
table. Yeah. And I still didn't, like 4 months later, I still had no idea.
You're like an hour was better than
Yeah.
the whatever the Z or whatever the
Exactly
lowest one
right.
was. So
Exactly right.
that's hilarious. It's so funny. Yeah, Canadian was A to E. So
Oh yeah, it was different. And that was the other thing. There were like there was like two different in the US, like two different code systems. I
oh yeah,
I still, to this day, I still don't get it. Anyway.
oh yeah. I like that's this one. I mean, we're in this industry of full customization. I mean, if someone orders a tractor trailer load of something blank, you could send that back, or if they don't want it or it goes wrong. But we decorate and customize everything. What was your biggest screw up along the way, and what'd you learn from it?
God, there are a lot. There are a whole lot actually. I think from a product standpoint of like order gone wrong, I don't know. I don't know if I remember that because there were quite a few, to be honest with you, especially early on. But I think that probably the biggest thing I remember through the years is when we started our fulfillment operation. We started warehousing on a very small scale and shipping stuff for our customers. We're doing this work. We were doing that work for quite a while where we were charging freight, obviously, because that's a very easy thing to track. But we were really doing it as almost as a favor. And you start looking at the business and you start digging into the quarter, into the year, and you start wondering like, okay, where's this going? Right? Like there's gotta be more here, right? Like where's some of the like revenue? Well, when you're spending half of your day boxing stuff up and shipping it out and nobody's compensating you for that work or that labor, and you're talking about at the time your sales and operations people who have selling and operations to do are also doing that work. You can quickly get behind, the eight ball. And I think that was probably the biggest wake up call that I remember
Hmm.
is early on. And luckily early on, we just kind of said like, hey, something's got to change, right? Like this can't just be a service we provide, out of goodwill here. If we're going to do this work, let's really develop this work. Let's figure out how to operate the right way, what billable hours look like and those things. And what came out of it was beautiful. I mean, we have an incredible fulfillment operation today. I would say maybe the most sophisticated in our industry. But it was probably that moment that I remember more than anything else is we're doing this work, we're doing a lot of this work, over time and not accounting for the little things, right? The labor, the time, the packaging costs, all these different things that are happening just because we're happy to be getting those orders, right?
Sure, you're
Business is
moving
growing,
business,
sales
it's
are growing.
growing. Yeah,
It's easy to lose track of kind of what's happening day to day.
absolutely. Did you ever think along the way that it would get this big? I mean, you've got a very successful operation. You employ a lot of people. Was this part of the plan for you?
I mean, I'd like to say yes, to happen in the amount of time that it's happened, probably not. I'd probably tell you that it's happened quicker than I anticipated. I knew from the get-go, and I think this is important for any entrepreneur to understand. I didn't want to run a lifestyle business, because I think as an entrepreneur, you have to decide early, right? And maybe not. Like you can transition later if you want to. Like I've seen that happen and happen successfully. But for me, it was always about growing a business, right? Growing enterprise value, scaling. That was the day one goal. It wasn't just, hey, let's build a nice business and something that is nothing more than a lifestyle business, which look, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it's really important to understand right from the get-go, like what type of business do you want to start? What type of business do you want to own? What type of business do you want to run? Because there's some significant differences in how you operate and how you scale it. So yeah, from the get-go, I didn't want a lifestyle business. I think that was known and I operated that way. And so, again, everything we've done over the years has been done with great intention. The hires that we've made, the process change that has happened. And there's been a lot of that. I'd say, there's significant change that happens every year with us. And that's just to keep up with growth, to be quite honest with you. And so, yeah, the intention was to grow it to this size and bigger. Honestly, like we're not done yet. We have a ways to go to kind of meet that goal, but in the amount of time, probably not. I would say.
That's awesome. I mean, again, I know you're a visionary guy, but you've done a lot of really great things and a lot of smart moves along the way to do that. And I think, I was reflecting on what you were talking about, a lifestyle business. I think a lot of people in our industry, because it's a makeup of a lot of smaller companies, it's whether it's set out to be or not, it becomes a lifestyle business. But you've, I think, helped educate a lot of people on, really making sure you're billing out the value in each department in this industry, and looking at this from a strategic shareholder standpoint to say, let's build the value, right? So because then it allows you to service customers better, create more opportunities internally for your team, add more team, and I think just a lot to be said about that.
Yeah, and look, we talked about kind of falling into the industry by chance, and I kind of said it jokingly, but that's honestly the case for most people, right? I mean, I
Most
think
do, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I
Same
think same for
co-op
you.
job. I'm like,
Yeah,
catalogs on the desk. I'm like, I'm selling what? Like pens and t-shirts and magnets?
yeah, and I mean, so I think, look, that lends itself to a lifestyle business quite often, right? Like you kind of fall into it, you have some success, you start to reap the benefits of that success to a certain extent. And it's never, it's more work to think about how to get to the next level than a lot of people want to take on. And I get that because,
Yeah.
I'll never forget the first million in revenue and 5, and then how hard it was to get to 10 and so on. And so, it's daunting. Like you really, really have to want to go on that journey. You have to want to put in the work and make the sacrifices, and make really hard decisions along the way. I mean, I think any entrepreneur would tell you as they continue to scale their business, the decisions only get harder, and it really falls typically on one person to make those decisions. It's a ton of pressure. And either you're cut out for that or you're not cut out for that. And so I think that also plays a role in lifestyle business, or something that, again, you want to scale and grow.
Brandito, what's the secret sauce? You guys are doing a
Yeah.
lot of things really well, but if you can nail it down to that one thing that you do better than anyone else, what is that?
Yeah, I think I think there are two things I always fall back on, and that is, we built a foundation, right? And we built core values, and we operate the business to a fault, off of that foundation and on those core values. I think that we are incredibly bullish around, staying in our lane and doing what we do well, right? And now look, and people would say, well, you've started this piece, this service offering, and you've built this in your business, and so on. True, that's very true. But like those are things that were really built out of customer demand, right? They're very easy kind of tying on opportunities to that kind of those core values and that original foundation that we built. And I think that there's something to be said about that, right? It's very easy, especially as you start to grow and have success. It's very easy as an entrepreneur, just because of how people are built, to start to kind of get distracted by these other things that are out there, these other opportunities, because you are a visionary and you think, at that point, it's like, well, I can do anything, right? Like like we can go out on this
Sure, you
path
build
and
some
we'll make it work.
confidence and success. Yeah.
100% right. But I think, for us, it's really been about, we haven't mastered what we set out to master in the first place. So let's continue to fine tune what we set out to do originally. And until we feel like we've mastered that, then the job's not done. And will that ever happen? I don't know. I don't know if that will ever happen, but if people say like, well, what is the secret, right? Like how do you continue to grow at the clip you're growing? I think that's it. I think it's because we are constantly trying to master our craft, constantly trying to improve the customer experience. It is talked about on a daily basis in our building. And it's not just talked about. A lot of times, if there's something that we think can add value, either internally or to our customers, then we put change in place, right? We make it happen. We have people that get that job done. Now, the other side of it is people. Like we have incredible people. It's from leadership down. And, I know that that's very cliche, right? A lot of people would say the same thing, but the reality is you can build these core values, you can build this foundation and you can set on this path of, just ad nauseum trying to master that craft. But if you don't have people that care as deeply about that mission and work constantly to try to achieve those results, then it never happens. It just doesn't. It doesn't happen with one person, because nobody's is bigger than the company. And so I think we just have people that have kind of latched on to what we're trying to accomplish, what the mission is. They care deeply about their customers. They care deeply about their peers that they work with. And that's a wonderful, beautiful thing. And, when you have that working in your building, you can do a lot. You can do a whole lot. So we've been really, really fortunate. We've hired great people. We have people that care, and they work really, really hard, So I think, and I would honestly tell anybody starting out the same thing, like, hey, know who you are, know what you're trying to accomplish, and then do everything every single day to make sure that you're always moving towards that end goal, whatever that might be. And if you're going to do that, then you better also hire great people. Don't be afraid to take a chance. Don't be afraid to go out and get people smarter than you, because it's going to take those people to carry out that mission.
Yeah, it's beautifully said, man. Words of wisdom. I got like 3 minutes of just the best content ever on that. It's again, I get to see you live this, and I've been fortunate to go down and visit your office and meet a bunch of your team members, and that it's something special for sure. So there's
Thank you.
Impeccable advice in there. And experience.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, it's I tell them every year that I'm one of the luckiest people on earth. I get to wake up, I get to go to work with a group of people that truly enjoy what they do. And that's pretty special. I'm very, very lucky.
Absolutely. Okay, I want to talk about a big move that you made in the recent years. You made a decision to bring on some financial partners, and like you're going to explain, is a lot more than financial, strategic. So let's talk about, you made the decision, hey, I'm going to go out, and whether it's private equity or VC, there's a bunch of ways. How did you land on the firm you picked, and why them versus anyone else?
Yeah, great question. So I think let's kind of start with why now, like what led us to this point, because I think that's also really important to understand in our process, at least. I bringing on a partner, a private equity partner, was always part of the plan. For us, like, I'm a firm believer that one, you've got to build your business and you've got to grow organically to a certain point, right? Because you've got to work all those things out. You've got to figure out how to stand on your own 2 feet. You've got to figure out how to kind of get the engine going and moving on a very regular basis and the consistency behind it. And so, we just got to a point where we had grown organically, you know, to a number in a place as a business where I thought it was time to start exploring acquisition as just another component of growth and scaling the business. And so in that process, we decided to kind of go full out and we hired a bank to take us through this process and take us to market. And we were very, very lucky that we had a lot of interest in the company, which is very, very flattering. But, that bank was instrumental in kind of forming what we were trying to accomplish, because I would say what I wanted out of this transaction was probably quite a bit different than most. And I think that there's some stigma behind, private equity a lot, right? I think that,
Sure, there
people,
is.
there's some bad taste, and rightfully so. I mean, I've heard the stories, but for me, it was all about, okay, I need somebody that believes in what we're doing, right? And how we're doing it. I need somebody that believes in my team and wants to just simply get behind the team to cheer and really just help us move forward into another level as an organization. And oh, by the way, I want to stay in control of the business, and not only that, but I also want to roll significant equity, in that transaction. A lot of those things are not something that typically come with a private equity deal. To be honest with you. But
Sure.
that was the goal. And the bank we hired, Dickinson Williams, who's actually based here in Richmond, Virginia, which we were very lucky to have. They did a tremendous job. Kind of once we had this interest, really starting to vet these opportunities and these firms and these people that were interested in the business. And we got down to a point where we kind of settled on 3 folks that we really, really liked.
And this is
That
from a list of what, a dozen plus? You're
Yeah, I mean, I don't even remember initial interest. Maybe there was 20 something. And then, that got dwindled down to when we got into kind of the formal LOI stage. It got dwindled down to, I don't know, maybe 8 legitimate kind of players in that space. And then from that 8, we went down to kind of 3 of like, hey, these 3 seem to fit the bill, right? They seem to be in line with what we're looking to do and what I want to do. So
And I
in
think
that,
before you move on, that process, for those that don't understand, is and myself included, it's grueling, right? I mean,
it is.
your team's involved, you're pitching, you're basically selling them, this is why you want to be with us. Tell me real quick about that experience and how grueling that was.
Yeah, I mean, it's not for the faint of heart, right? I mean, it's taking your existing day job and adding another job on top of it, a full-time job, because it is literally stripping every ounce of your business out to be able to share with another party, for lots of reasons. One, they need to see it if they're going to be making an investment, right? That's the obvious. But 2, you also want to portray your business in the best light. You want to make
Mhm.
sure that your business is prepared for the moment per se. And so, yeah, it's literally digging into every ounce of the business,
So
financially,
drop
operationally.
your pants in every way.
Oh yeah, it's full prison. There's no question about that. So it's it is a grueling process. It's a long process. It's not something that happens in a short amount of time, in a formal process like this. So yeah, it will take its toll on everybody involved. There's no question.
So you're down to 3. At this point, how do you decide?
Yeah, so we actually we went through management presentations, and that's where you sit in a conference room with these on an individual basis, and and you're kind of digging into that information, right? You're getting questioned. They're trying to get the best picture they can on the business and how it operates and key players, all the things that they need to know. And at the same time, we're asking all the questions to them, right? To kind of get the best feel we can on their side. And you're talking about, boardroom for 3 hours, kind of going through this stuff. And so we actually got to a place where, we obviously had to make a decision. And this was probably quite unique is the firm we're with today, Monroe Street Partners out of Chicago, and I'll speak about them in a second, but they were the very first people that we met in this process and spent time with. And instantly, when they left, my entire team that was involved in myself, everybody said, yep, that's it. You know,
And so you guys knew.
we knew, but we knew from a personal standpoint, right? They were a great fit. The conversation was very easy. You know, you could instantly kind of feel that they were very much on board and behind what we were trying to accomplish in the manner that we wanted to do that. And so it was just a wonderful visit. But we actually did not choose them originally. We actually got down to a place of three very, very good opportunities, three very good partners. You know, you're really kind of splitting hairs at that point, right? You're trying to do your best to make the right decision. It's not a small decision, right? It's a pretty big one.
Sure.
And because, you know, after making that decision, you kind of jump back into final diligence, and final diligence might be worse than the original diligence. And so, you know, there's that process as well. So we ended up actually choosing another firm originally, and for all the same reasons, right? Like they were on board, they were behind the team. It was the same feel. You know, they were a little bit bigger. Monroe Street, who we're with today, we were actually going to be their second portfolio company. They were new at opening Monroe Street themselves, which again, I'll speak to that in a second. But so it really came down to, okay, let's take the safer bet, right? Like, let's go with somebody that's been around a little bit longer. You know, this feels like it's the right business decision. And that was a mistake, you know, to be honest with you, when it was all said and done, because we actually got down to close. We're about 2 weeks from closing the deal. So you're talking another 3 or 4 months at this point of diligence that's been
Wow.
going on. And so we're actually 2 weeks out from closing this opportunity. And I had started to see some things I didn't like. I had started to see some
Spidey
behavior.
sense is going off, right? Or something's telling
Yeah,
you
you
it's,
know, the gut starts telling you like, hey, something's not right, right? Like it
yeah.
feels different. We don't have the same feeling that we had when we started this process. And I actually pulled the plug 2 weeks before close on that deal. And I'll give the bank that I was working with tremendous amount of credit, because most banks, having gone through that process and getting to that point, would have done everything they can to just kind of, like cold feet, let's just kind of shove this thing
Yeah, they
across the
think you're
finish
nuts
line.
doing it that close to the finish line.
But they kind of said right away, they're like, hey, look, I think you're making the right decision. And, you know, and it's funny because after I made that decision, my team, my leadership team, who was involved in some of that process, kind of gave a big sigh of relief. And they were like,
Wow. So they knew too.
they knew too, right? So we all kind of were having these feelings, but you know, it's very difficult. How are you going to tell a founder as a leader, like, you're going to walk in and go, hey, I'm not so sure about this. We're 2 weeks from close, but
Sure.
I'm not so sure about this. But, you know, it ended up being the best decision we ever made, because what transpired after that, we kind of took a breather, and I reconnected with the guys at Monroe Street Partners, Ken Mill and Alex Foshager, the two founders. And I think maybe 2 months later, I flew to Chicago to have dinner with them. And just in that conversation, just in a very personal conversation, you know, I just kind of knew, right? I went right back to what we originally felt in our original meeting. And that was that these guys are the people that we've been looking for, right? These are the guys that we want to work with. I love the fact that we were the second portfolio company, because they're hungry, right? They're still hungry. They're still out grinding. They've got a lot of things to prove themselves. And I think that's very special. You know, I think there's something to be said about that. And we ended in a place where we jumped back in, went through diligence again, and ended up closing the deal with Monroe Street Partners. And I think August, it's been a little bit over a year now. And I'll say this, they've lived up to the billing. They've lived up to everything that they said they were. It's been a tremendous partnership. You know, we are working incredibly well together. And yeah, we couldn't be happier. It's been fantastic. So again, you talk about moments in time again, you know, pulling the plug 2 weeks out from closing a deal, something significant, obviously for the company, for myself personally. It led us to a place of being where we're supposed to be.
Yeah, it's such a defining moment. And, you know, from what you told me, it was, you know, not a handshake deal, but you going up and having that conversation, you knew quick, hey, these are the guys, you know, they're young, they're hungry. They do have money to make sure we could execute this
Right.
deal, but, you know, being able to get that done quick and move forward was spectacular. So Yeah, next question for you regarding that. Like, what are a couple of the biggest things that you learned having, just some different experience and expertise coming to sit around the table?
As far as private equity is concerned, or just part
Yeah,
of the
having just,
process?
getting this partner and what have
Yeah.
you learned from these guys in particular?
Yeah. I think look, for the first time ever, talk about having a boss, right? So like, I think a lot of people like to ask that question, and yeah, it's true. Like I'm still the single largest shareholder, so my situation's a bit different than most, right? So I'll say that, but I have a board that I report to, and we have tremendous people on our board. And it's been a little bit refreshing, honestly, is that's the thing that maybe I didn't value a ton going into this process. And what's refreshing is, being surrounded by new people, kind of they have a different lens now, right? They have different experience, different background, incredibly smart people, yeah, at that. And so just, the brain trust and the ability to really kind of have a new set of eyes on this thing, has been tremendous. It's been exciting. You can't put value in it. And so when you talk about picking a partner and finding somebody that's really behind the business and really likes doing, what you're doing today and just wants to be a part of that, you will get the added benefit of just having some really smart people in the room that see things differently. And I think in any case, right, it's like, why do you have mentors, right? Why do you have people that you lean on? It's for that very reason. It's like different perspective, different time, different place, because you can have blinders on, especially as an entrepreneur. 15 years in, you make every decision. We call it decision fatigue in our building, right?
That's
Like,
right.
you get to the point of decision fatigue. Now, all of a sudden, you have some people that are kind of helping you through the next stage of your organization. So that's been surprising and been something that is just, quite honestly, a benefit I didn't think about.
That's awesome. Ever have any moments where you're like, man, I feel like I just got to pull this, majority shareholder card, or, I feel like I'm right, but I gotta let go.
No, no, not so far. No, we'll see how it plays out. But no, they again, when I talk about them kind of upholding their end of the bargain, I mean that. I mean, they really continue to trust me with making the decisions that need to be made. We obviously at times, I do lean on them to kind of give their perspective on different things. But no, I haven't had to do it. They have really just said, hey, your show, your team show, you guys obviously were doing incredibly well. We're not going to get in the way, but if you need us and we need to be a resource, just tell us. So
Yeah,
it's
that's
been
cool.
it's
And I
been
mean,
pretty cool.
you're a humble guy to be able to put your hand up when you need help and lean on them when you need it. So that's cool.
Well, look, you can't do it all, right? I mean, if anybody said, like, if you ever heard me saying, like, hey, I did all of this by myself, you can punch me in the nose, because
Absolutely.
it's just not true. There's no
Yeah.
there's no truth to that.
Takes a full team and village.
That's right.
So you guys are out making acquisitions, continuing to grow organic side of the business and acquiring. How difficult is it to find the right partners as you sift through, a lot of companies going to market?
Yeah, I think for us, maybe even a little more difficult. You know, I think the first thing you have to remind yourself, first and foremost, is if you own a company, selling your company is an incredibly difficult thing to do in the first place. And so when you're on the other side of the table, having gone through, the process of selling the business and now being on the other side of the table, I have to remind myself quite often, like, hey, this is a very difficult thing to do. Very few people ever have the opportunity to do that. So that's kind of the starting point, right? Which isn't easy. Then for us, we are maybe a little bit different. Our industry is pretty famous for just kind of, what I call renegade roll up. It's just, hey, let's roll up as many companies, as many books of business as we can, and anybody that's willing, kind of to do that or go through that process. We've been incredibly strategic, right? We're looking for very specific things that we know will work, that will fit into our fabric, to our DNA as a company, because that is incredibly important, right? If you go on this roll up mentality, you can compromise a lot of what you've built, some of that DNA, as I called it. And so, yeah, for us, it's difficult, right? It's difficult because one, there's competition, two, it's incredibly hard on the other side of the table to sell a business, right? To have a business in a place where it's ready to sell and where you're going to get the value you want to get out of it. And then on top of that, being incredibly picky on our side, that adds another layer to it. But look, I wouldn't do it any other way because we know that when we find the right partner in this process, we're going to add to what is already a vibrant culture. And we're just going to be able to kind of continue that forward again, because like I said, we are just bullish on staying the course, right? And perfecting the craft. And when we bring somebody else into the mix, we want that mission to be the same, to not change.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I know you guys are finding the right ones along the way too, and being picky is only going to help you.
Yeah, it's the roll up mentality. Like, look, it's strategy, right? Like, I mean, from an M&A perspective, I can't be the one to sit here and say like that's silly, it doesn't work, because it has worked, right? And but again, it's all about who do you want to be, right? How do you want to do it? How do you want to grow? What do you want the legacy of the organization to be? You just have to be very, very honest with yourself through that process. That those aren't things to compromise. If you care deeply about it, then you should do everything in your power to make sure it's not compromised, especially during imminent.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a ton of advice, wisdom, and experience you've shared here today, and I appreciate that. If you're sitting down with someone that's saying, "Hey, Michael, I'm looking at doing this thing on my own, or I want to venture out, or I want to partner with someone to do that," what advice would you give them, knowing what you know?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a question that I get from people. And look, it goes back to what I've already said. So, I won't go into tremendous detail there. It's what are you setting out to do? To being very honest with yourself and what the goal or what the mission is incredibly important. And then staying very true to that and making sure that, again, don't compromise that, because that's why you originally set out and started on this journey. And so, it's very easy to let maybe one of your first employees or somebody from the outside, even a mentor in some cases, to really influence what you're trying to accomplish. And so you just have to always remind yourself that, hey, there's only one person out of the gate that can dictate, the success of this venture, and that's me. And so at all costs, what do I need to do to make sure that we're going on the path that I set out to be on? But, beyond that, like, if there's any notion that it doesn't take a tremendous amount of work, right?
Yeah,
I think everybody believes, and you can speak to this, everybody believes when they start on a journey or entrepreneurship that, oh, it's going to be a ton of work and I'm going to put my heart and my soul into it. But a lot of things happen over the years, right? Or over time, either failures, right? Like they can put a kink in the situation. Success can also put a kink in that situation, because you can easily think that, okay, well, it's just going to start happening now. And that's
sure.
not
You
the
get
case.
blinded by it.
Yeah, you certainly do get blinded by it. So, it's just sheer work and consistency. I think that's like, there are no opportunities to take time off in away from the mission. Every day is a new challenge. And if you treat it that way, I think you're gonna have some success. And I even tell, like, when I hire new employees to this day that come into the company, it's what I said to our first employee. It's what I'll say to every employee from here out is, my only expectation of you is that we're consistent. And so if your job is sales, if your job is in operations, it doesn't matter what you do for the organization. All I ask is that when you come in each day, that you're consistent in what you're supposed to be accomplishing, because it's those lulls in consistency that tend to cause problems, and you can get off track a little bit. So I think as long as you're very upfront about what your goal, what your mission is, where you're trying to take the organization, how you want to do that, and then you're just consistent day in and day out and carrying that mission forward, you're going to have a chance to be successful. And then last, like, don't be afraid. Again, you're going to make a ton of mistakes. I think everybody says this is like, if you're not making decisions because you're afraid it's going to fail, or you're afraid you're going to upset somebody, then you're in the wrong thing, right? You're doing the wrong thing, because You're going to make mistakes. You're going to upset people. You're not always going to be the most popular person in the room. Okay. Because there are going to be really difficult decisions that have to be made in order for the company to move forward or to stay on track. And so you just have to be comfortable doing that. You have to be comfortable making tough decisions and upsetting people from time to time, because if you're staying on track, the benefit that it's going to create for you, your family, the people that work in the organization is going to be far greater than that one person that you potentially upset.
Yeah, it's fantastic advice. Well said.
Yeah. I see, Chris, honestly, I think I see probably one of the biggest mistakes, and we've made this mistake, so I can speak to it. It's easy to let people dictate certain aspects of your business, right? Because you live in a little bit of a place of fear as an entrepreneur, right? It's like,
Sure.
I mean, geez, I remember waiting by the mailbox every day, hoping we got paid by the customer so I could make payroll, right? I mean, lots of people have those stories. And so it's that place of fear, like, oh gosh, like, where's the next order going to come from? Are we going to get paid on time so we can make payroll? Like, I can't let these people down. And so it's this place of fear that we live in that is just going to be there. It's going to exist. It's really what drives a lot of entrepreneurs. But in that place of fear, you can have people that for selfish reasons can start to dictate how the business is operating or what the business is doing. And it's easy to be blinded by that, because it's like, gosh, if I don't make this person happy, or we don't make this change in the organization because this is what everybody thinks that should happen, am I going to lose people, right? Like, or are they not going to, are they going to go elsewhere? Or they're not going to, work as hard? It's all of these things. And you start to make decisions and you start to do certain things at times that just are out of character, right? That really aren't
Yeah,
necessary.
second guess what you know, but
Yeah, and it's easy to do. And I think that, like, that's where a lot of times businesses start to kind of go on a slightly different path, and you start to make exceptions, you start to compromise your original goals. And you just have to be very honest with yourself. You have to understand when those moments are there, and you have to make sure that, again, you stay on course, you stay on track.
yeah, so true. Two last questions. You got a beautiful family. You're the one man in the house. You got two beautiful daughters and a beautiful wife. How do you balance, the family and business world? Because I think, from experience and having lots of friends that are entrepreneurs and circles, it can be difficult at times, and there's different seasons depending on what's going on. And I would say especially early on. How have you balanced that out in your career?
Yeah, great question. I'm nowhere near perfect, right? I mean, but I think, one, my wife is also an entrepreneur. She has an executive search firm. She's very good at what she does. And so, she keeps me grounded in a lot of ways. And she keeps me grounded because, she's very passionate about her work and what she's doing. And so I have to be very respectful of it, right? I can't take advantage of that because I'm wrapped up in my world and what I'm doing. And then beyond that, when I'm at home, and I'm a homebody, like I love being at home. And I think so being present is a big part of it, right? And so, I think about just, the moments, right? Not missing a soccer game, and not missing a school event, and doing whatever it takes, no matter what, whether it's changing your schedule or canceling meetings or doing whatever's necessary to just be present. Like, I think that, that's the simplest thing that can happen as a parent or as a spouse, that probably goes the furthest, is that you're there, you're engaged. You're not just there and on your
In
phone or
body.
here or
Yeah.
there. Yeah. It's being present and active. And so I just have to remind myself of that. I think that's, because again, I'm not perfect. I certainly have my moments, like everybody, but it's those moments where you just remind yourself of, like, look, you're just dad, that's all you are. Like, under this
They don't
roof,
care about any of it, right?
they don't. Like, it's actually cool though. I mean, my daughters are getting to it at an age now where they're starting to understand Brandito and the work and what it's what we've had to do to get to this point,
Sure.
and they're very
Beyond the fun
proud.
merch that you bring home
Yeah,
over the years,
that's
right?
right. That's right. Yeah, they love the merch closet. There's no question
Yeah,
about that.
that's right.
But like, they're starting to become very proud of that, and which is cool. I mean, there's honestly not anything that's a whole lot more rewarding than that. But even as proud as they are, as much as they love it, again, still just dad. And, and I'd say the same thing, I have a great group of friends, very fortunate, very tight knit group of friends, that have been around and been through the good, the bad, the ugly. And, I think when you talk about unwinding and those things, it's the same thing. It's like, it's not, has nothing to do with Brandito. It's just me, same guy that's been around forever, and they make sure I know that. And that's important too, having those people around you, because they make things simpler, is what I like to say. You can have a bad day, you can have a lot on your plate, but you get in those moments where, again, you're just dad, you're just Michael, and they just nobody, the person sitting across from you is not looking at you any differently. That's nice, right? There's comfort in that.
Yeah, and I think to add to that is you're also the guy that probably hasn't changed 1 ounce in the amount of time, and I think that's the important part of it.
Depends on who you ask.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, hey, you're still the fun-loving, goofy, silly guy that since I've known you. But I think that's some those moments you shared in your lifetime that were just, as you said, defining moments that made you you. But it needs to have both sides of it, right? You can't change drastically as a human to those people, or it's not going to be the same relationship.
Yeah, I mentioned one of my really good friends that got me into the staffing business. He's an
Yeah.
incredibly successful entrepreneur himself, and down in Dallas, he's in Dallas, Texas, and we talk. I mean, we talk once a week still. We've talked once a week since we were 15 years old, and
That's awesome.
to a point, our wives were like, "My gosh, like, did you guys
Couple of
miss each
hens
other?"
chatting
Yeah,
away.
it's
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Man
and
love.
we call it, like, we're kind of the checkpoint for each other, because he'll get into a place, and I'll get into a place, and you know this very well, where, you're just kind of, you're venting, you're getting it all out, you're talking about all the things that are driving you crazy, and this, that, and the other, and all your problems. And, he'll stop me, and I'll do the same to him. And he'll just say, "Hey man, just quick note, like, remember where you came, and, remember where this started." And, it's literally that simple little thing where it just kind of checks you, and you're like, "Yeah, you're right." It's that simple. You just have to remember where it started, and what it took to get to this point, because, it's not just business, it's life, it's a journey. It's like I said earlier, ups, downs, good, bad, in between. And you can't forget the journey, because it is why you're where you are today, without question.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, and again, experience from hanging around you enough is the one thing that, and I've seen it through your team, and all you do is you bring this light, fun spirit in business, which there's such a great place for it, and I think businesses need more of that. I'd suggest never change that and keep doing that, because it's infectious. It's a lot of fun. So
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, and it's interesting to hear that, because, again, those are the blinder things, right? Like, those are the things that you don't think about, you don't see. And so it means a lot to you saying that. I appreciate that.
it's my pleasure. Well, listen, man, I can't thank you enough for taking all the time, but I'm so excited to again share this with the world, and your story is incredible. Your team's lucky to have you. Brandito, you've done incredible things, and I'm just excited to watch the continued success and growth, not just with Monroe Street Partners, but everyone around you guys as you continue to tackle this industry and change the world. So thanks for your
Yeah,
time, brother.
well, yeah, I appreciate that, Chris. And I'll say this again. Look, I very rarely share my personal story, and I'm a pretty private guy. But you mean a lot to me. I admire you as a person, as a business person, and I wouldn't have done this for anybody else. So thank you at the same time.
My pleasure, man. Means the world to me.
Yeah,
All right,
thanks,
we'll
Chris.
chat soon. Thanks,
Okay.
Michael.